Hey, Megan.
Hey, John, how you doing? Happy Friday.
Happy Friday to you, and
Happy
welcome
account-based
everyone.
Friday.
Yeah, exactly. Account-based Friday. I can't believe it's Friday already, and I guess welcome to the audience here that is slowly piling in on YouTube. This is a newer format for us. My name is John Russo. I'm founder of B2B Fusion. This is a newer format where we're going to be experimenting, at least getting our sea legs with a live YouTube production. So thank you for bearing with us and living through any hiccups that we might have. But Megan, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yep, sure. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today and for all the great feedback on LinkedIn, too. We were so excited to see that people were interested in joining us and talking all things account-based. I'm Meg Hewer, and I'm currently a managing director at Winning by Design, a consultancy focused on bringing science to the revenue team to help them improve performance. But before that, I've worked with a number of folks, possibly joining today through my work with Serious Decisions for many years, founding their account-based practice and doing work with all kinds of different companies over many years, and have been a passionate advocate of all things account-based for a long time. So excited to have a chance to talk with people about it and hear what's on your mind too, John, as one of my favorite all-time clients.
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate that, Megan. And I appreciate you making the time to do this on an ongoing basis. I think our genesis, or the reason why we were thinking about doing this, was we felt as practitioners, there wasn't a lot of vendor neutral information that was out there. We help a lot of companies, both Megan and I. I have a consultancy in and around account-based marketing practices. We've done over 100 account-based marketing engagements. And one of the things that we see a lot of our clients wrestling with is just information and kind of a vendor neutral approach. So as Megan and I were brainstorming around about how we could be producing something that would be of value, we thought we'd start with this 30-minute interactive conversation. You should, if you're watching on YouTube, you should be able to drop your comments below and we will pick them up. But the format of this is we're thinking we first start off with kind of what's top of mind or an issue that each of us have been working on. And I guess I'll ask you, Megan, to maybe start in terms of account-based issues this past week. And, we see headaches, you see headaches, challenges and opportunities. What kind of things are you seeing right now in the last week or so?
Yeah, and curious to hear if you're seeing this too. But I would say there are kind of two themes that have been, I think, kind of a big deal this week. One is around strategy and really thinking about which accounts should I be focused on? And that just remains a harder question than I think people think it will be when they enter into an account-based strategy, deciding who you want to engage and why and what you want to get out of that engagement, which leads to the second topic that's been really close to me this week, which is measurement. And how do you think about shifting the way that marketing measures when top of the funnel demand gen isn't necessarily your only goal, but it's part of your goal. Like, it doesn't go away, it just shifts and gets adjusted and focused in a different way. So those have been things that I've been working with customers on and just sort of seeing broadly too, in terms of market interest and sort of thinking about those areas. And that being, for example, one of the inputs to, if people are putting in place like an account-based platform, like a demand-based or a Sixth Sense, or, if you're putting that in, that becomes one of the questions that's actually hard to answer, but really critical to, making sure that you get the most out of those systems. And then on the back end of that, how do you use them to measure? So kind of all tied in there. But John, I know you've been doing some interesting work with customers in the area of measurement. Maybe you could share a little bit about that, because I think it would be helpful for people to hear kind of how you're thinking of it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, unpacking your two questions,
Yeah.
The first question about the target account side of things,
Yeah.
we have totally seen that too. And I almost think there's like a couple different camps there. One camp is companies really understand their target market. That's one end of the spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
And then the opposite end of the spectrum, and we usually see this in the small growing SaaS companies, is they think they know, but they're growing fast. They're not positive. They have a hypothesis, but there may be a whole number of accounts that they're not even aware of. And depending on where you're on in that spectrum, there are ways, and my topic this week is going to be intent data, but intent data would be a way to potentially identify which of those accounts are worthy or not worthy, which are in market, which are not in market. So it's a really interesting area. In fact, it's related to the area that I was going to bring up as well, which is that target market selection process. And I was looking at the technology side of things more so than anything on the intent piece. And then on the second part of your question, measurement side, just this past week, although we're vendor neutral, we co-presented with a client on an intent data platform, Bombora, which we talked about what's called a unified funnel, which is bringing in MQLs and account-based marketing into one funnel in Salesforce. So there's one source of truth where you can answer business level questions of route to market. That's pretty challenging to get to be quite frank. We had to do a fair amount of work around business process, but once you get the business process down and the Salesforce and the marketing automation and the ABM platform all singing the same tune, it's really, really powerful. So I could see why you would be wrestling with that. But let's go back to your first question about the target market side of things. What are you seeing trend-wise there?
I'll add a piece to that too. I had an interesting conversation with someone this week about the fact that account-based marketing had a hard time in a company that they were working with when they didn't have clear product market fit. So it's almost like there's two directions, right? There's target account selection, but then it's also, especially for earlier stage companies, but in some cases later stage companies too that are shifting their offerings, there's a little bit on have you really figured out the sweet spot for what you do and the value proposition, and that then impacts how you choose your target account. So I wanted to add that one piece to it, but please.
That's a great find. How did you discover that, or what? Like as you were looking at the data, like how did you come across that? Just out of curiosity.
Well, in this case, I was asking a simple question, right? I was asking a question about the impact of some work that they'd been doing around account-based marketing. How did it go? And they said, frankly, not that well. and I said, well, I had to ask the question, then why, right? And the answer was because we weren't quite there yet with understanding our value proposition, having our market fit be clear, and therefore it's my favorite Yogi Bear saying, if you don't know where you're going, you'll probably get there. I think it was very much a case of that.
Yeah, it sounds very, very familiar. It's almost as if a lot of these companies have a hypothesis or a hope, like I hope this is the right target market, and until they get out there, find the product market fit, or they get some data, intent or otherwise, they really don't know until they start getting the data of the closed won opportunities, and they can kind of calibrate back. So I could see what you're saying there in terms of a big challenge, and really that's probably the base point to start with if you're doing an account-based strategy. I would guess, like in our engagements, we're typically coming in when a company has picked up account-based marketing as an initiative, so they have tiered or they're starting to tier their accounts. Are you starting to see, like, where do you pick up in the process, out of curiosity?
Yeah. Well, often winning by design comes through the sales organization. I think they're best, and they've been doing that for a very long time. And it's an interesting entry point because it's very often the case that you find in a sales model, if you think about, okay, one of the first things that will get answered in a question, kind of working with winning by design, is what's the right go-to-market? Like, if based on who you want to sell to and how much you sell, whatever it is you sell for, what is the right go-to-market strategy? Should it be, on the kind of extreme low end? Is it product-led growth? Because you really don't need sales involved. The product sort of does that for you at that point. Or on the extreme other side, is it kind of like one-to-one strategic account? And there are variations and combinations in there, but it's really starting with that. Is first of all, based on who you're trying to reach, what you're trying to sell them, and how much you're selling it for, and the growth you want to achieve. Do you have the right go-to-market model or mix? So we're kind of starting back there, and then once you know that, right, and the economics are clear, then you can start to layer in, okay, so this is what this means for your sales strategy, this was what this means for your marketing strategy, and this is what it means for your customer strategy, right? What's the right support and customer success, or whatever kind of account management model you need to have, and then customer marketing too. But we're kind of starting back there to look at, but it's different than product market fit. So if you haven't established product market fit, it's really hard to know what your go-to-market strategy should be. And then therefore, if you sort of skip past that or have assumptions that turn out to be incorrect about your product market fit, then the go-to-market that suggests, or you've defined what you think is your product market fit, and you said, okay, and this is my go-to-market model. But say you find out with your first set of customers, or after a couple of years of serving customers, that it's actually a lot harder to get them to value, to get them to impact than you thought. So, oh, we're going to do all self-serve and people are just going to take the training and they're going to be able to use the product. Maybe not so much, right? A lot of times it's harder than you think. So therefore, your customer success people are putting in a lot more time, and you thought they could handle 100 accounts and they can really only handle 20. Like, there are all these questions that come in. So there's a whole bunch of optimization that that can be done, I think. But if a couple of those, you either have to go in, I think, saying, I know I'm testing assumptions, and therefore you're trying some different things, or you have to go in pretty confident in your assumptions based on, the economics of your business may tell you what you can afford to do too. And if you're not able, if it doesn't work, that's a different problem. But it's either a virtuous or a vicious cycle, depending on how well you did up front on those assumptions and validating them. And then going in and saying, okay, therefore, what is my target account strategy? And I think that's where people sometimes get frustrated in ABM too, right? Is you can have way too big of an audience, way too small of an audience, depending on where you think you are in the market. But yeah, I've seen all of the above over the last couple of weeks, really.
I like your thought about the testing side of things. And we see this pretty consistently in a lot of our engagements right now, where account-based marketing is a departure of the traditional MQL, or what we've trained. Your old company trained everybody really well to do at the board level now is crack the whip on more leads. And then all of a sudden you start migrating to this account-based thought process. And I think, you said it really well about the assumptions. You have to have assumptions. I would go one step further. You have to have the culture that's willing to put their neck out there for the assumption testing or mistake testing or even change management. And I think that's a big piece of, yes, you're trying to select accounts to go after. Yes, marketing should be involved in that process. But a culture has to be supportive of this kind of testing, and a culture has to be willing to see the benefit. As marketers, we have to kind of sell the change of, hey, if we take these motions, we're going to get higher ARR, we're going to get quicker velocity, and there will be benefits from a sales and marketing investment perspective where you can actually see the returns. And in order to do this, here are the 2 or 3 things that as an organization you have to change. And I'm finding in this post-COVID world, it's really hard to get people's mindset around making even, I don't want to say transformational, evolutionary change or incremental change is really, really challenging to kind of get from point A to point B. So I think going back to your assumption comment, it really resonated when you mentioned that.
Yeah. Hey, you know what? I think we have our topic for next week: change management, right? I've been hearing that so much. It's so hard for people. And actually, I know one of the promises we made to our audience was we talk a little bit about, interesting resources and assets. And one of mine on the list, and I'll put this on LinkedIn too, but is a blog post from a Gartner analyst about kind of almost like change fatigue and what your communication strategy has to be in an environment where so much is changing. And how do you think about, sort of, instead of this being, over the top big announcements coming from management periodically, how do you have sort of an always on change communication strategy? And I thought that was very interesting and something that probably a lot of leaders need to consider. But to your point, John, I think now there's also a decreasing appetite for change because people need something to be the same in their lives. And work might be one of the places you'd like it to be the case, but unfortunately, change isn't slowing down. So I think as leaders too, we need to think about how do you make it more digestible. So I don't know, it could be a good topic for next week, maybe.
Yeah, definitely. I
want to talk intent too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And on the intent side, I just brought up a survey that I run these weekly surveys to kind of just check in with my own network. And this particular survey was on intent data, and it relates to your opening comment about the selection of target accounts. There's a lot of use cases for intent data. But one of the other reasons I brought it up is I'm finding a lot of clients are asking about intent data and the various use cases and who's better than who. And so I thought I'd just kind of test with a poll and see what do the people think in terms of the validity, the reliability, the impact that intent data has? And this was an interesting poll, and it's hard with LinkedIn, right? You only have so many characters that you can ask a question or punch in an answer. There's 19 interpretations from Sunday. Inevitably, you always get called out on something. And then, of course, I've got on the vendor side, they're always going to have their opinion. But what I noticed in this was I looked at the respondents, which you can't see in here, and I tried to. There were 44 people responded, which is terrific. There was a large percentage of I was really surprised. Friday it's easy to click on a quick answer, but within those 44, there were a fair number of vendors. I've got a number of relationships, as you're well aware, in the vendor community, and not surprising, the majority of the vendor relationships, if not all, were very bullish about ABM. Mm-hmm. I would say by and large right now, people are kind of in the prove it mode of account-based marketing intent data, and they're looking for ways to establish the ROI around it. So it's really interesting. At least I found this data interesting. I think there are a number of use cases that intent data could be used for, whether it's target market identification, managing your ad spend to certain accounts that are surging, identifying which accounts are in market or not in market, helping around the right keywords and search process. But there's a body of work with each of those. And I guess the last point I'll make here, and you'll be curious about your reactions on all of this, is in that area that we talked about earlier about challenges around intent data, I'm noticing that some of the intent providers kind of put themselves at center stage, and they're very disruptive around the sales process. You have to learn the process. You have to be trained on how to use it. Mm-hmm. And at least in our engagements, we try to make it an ingredient in the cake and make it a little less intrusive onto the sales process. Is it potentially great for a salesperson? Absolutely. But there's a training element, and there are other elements as well. But anyway, I'm doing a lot of talking here. Any kind of blink reactions from your experience there, Megan?
Yeah, I'm first of all, I think intent data is a critical data component right now. And if folks aren't using it, I think it's unfortunate, because it could really help. Right. And it's not that hard to use, I think, is the other nice thing about it. Now, there is a change management piece, but overall, I'm very excited about what intent data brings to the table, just generally. But that said, I think you also have to be realistic about what it does and doesn't do. Because if you put it in the right places, you got great stuff. If you try to get it to do maybe more than it should do, then you might be disappointed. So I can see where maybe some folks are saying, I'm not too sure. So, or if you haven't sort of backed up the use of it with clear guidance on what to do with it, I think that's also where I would not be surprised that people are saying, I'm not too sure. But the places where I see it really coming in handy, and this goes back to kind of our original talk about, hey, how do you choose the accounts that you want to engage? Well, every business can say, we believe these are the accounts that we should be serving. We believe these are the companies that can get the most value from what it is we're offering. And then you can layer in intent data right out of the gate to say, and especially like maybe for a new offering too, it doesn't just have to be like, oh, I'm a brand new company. If I'm an existing company and I want to bring a new offering to market, or I want to reach a new market with an existing offering, or all those different sort of go-to-market adjustments you might make, you can use intent data to say, are people in this market in fact searching for things related to the offering I believe they'll want? And if you're entering kind of an existing market where you're competing with known companies, great, that's an easy search. If it's a new concept, or to use the serious decisions language, right? Is it a new concept? Something that's not known yet, right? Nobody's got budget for it. It isn't a line item because they didn't know it was a problem they needed to solve, or maybe they knew it was a problem, but they didn't know anyone could solve it. That's a little more interesting kind of methodology to use intent data to validate that. You're going to be more creative about how you're looking for people who are thinking about that problem, but you can do it, right? You can go in and say, are people thinking about these things? And what kinds of companies, what kinds of roles are doing that? And then if it's a new paradigm, sort of the better mousetrap idea, I've got a different and better way to solve for a known problem. Again, same thing. Like, well, who would you be competing with for that same budget, even if you're not doing it the same way? And then also, what kinds of things would you want those companies to be searching for, people in those companies to be interested in, to indicate that they're going to be open to talking to you. And then obviously for, a known quantity where you're fighting for budget, so they're going to do something, it's me or the other guy, then that's, an easy use too, to validate who's looking, like who's in market now. The bad news about that one, though, is if they're already in market and you're not part of their consideration set, you're late to the game. Doesn't mean you lose, but it means it's harder for you to win. But all of those are use cases up front to say, okay, I've said who I think I should be engaging with. Am I right? And there's, so intent data is helping there. A little bit closer to the ground, though, is once I've established my list of target accounts, then if that's your sort of theoretically addressable market of companies that you'd like to sell to, and you validate, and probably, we have reason to believe they'll be interested in our solution, then you need to go and figure out which ones are actively searching or in market. And are they in your pipeline? Aren't they in your pipeline? And if they're not in your pipeline, are they looking? And then and if they are not in your pipeline and they're not looking, that's a different motion than if they are not in your pipeline and they're looking, right? Which is, how do I get them into my pipeline, because they're in somebody's. And then if they're in your pipeline and they're actively engaging, how do you have a feed going to your sellers or your marketers or whoever is going to take action, right? Or some combination of all of the above, your SDRs, helping them to prioritize and have some context for the outreach and the sequences that they're putting in place. So those are kind of all the and those are different ways. I wouldn't say all the ways. I'm sure the intent folks would have many more that I'm missing, but those are some of the things that I think are pretty exciting.
Yeah, I think just to summarize what you said, intent is not a silver bullet. No. And there are also different flavors of intent too. Yeah. So you've got the account level intent and you have contact level intent. Some providers do both. So TechTarget combines both as one example. Aberdeen, now that they've acquired Spiceworks, that would be another example of combining both. Logic. So Madison Logic. So there are definitely use cases here of even, intent at the account level. And we've been talking a lot about the target account selection and also identifying the people that are relevant to that account. And it really depends on how you're slicing and dicing at day's end. And then the other use case, I guess the last thing I'll mention is, depending on where you are in the funnel, for example, G2 Crowd is intent data at its best, really, for bottom of the funnel. And usually what we find there is great use cases if people are comparing the two. G2 Crowd is a great way to validate what accounts. They won't tell you who, but through Sales Navigator, they'll start connecting some dots there for you to generally tell you who would be interested in your product. But we find that that's typically better at the bottom of the funnel. Some of the other solutions, probably a little bit more aggressive at the top or the mid-size funnel. And again, it really varies by the flavor of intent, whether it be pure contact, or the hybrid model that we just talked about.
Well, and you just reminded me of one that I think people don't take advantage of enough too for intent, which is post-sale. Because we need to make sure, the whole SaaS model is predicated on the idea that if you keep the revenue you've sold, you grow faster because your foundation is strong, right? Intent data can tell you what your customers are worried about. And so by feeding that to your account managers, feeding that to your customer success people, so they're aware of relevant activity from your existing customers, you can be picking up on signs of defection very early. You can be picking up on problems they may be having with, or things that they're doing that may give you expansion opportunities, right? In cycle expansion opportunities, not just tied to renewal. So all really, really good use case there, underutilized, I think. Most companies look at it as top of funnel, but to your point, it's all funnel. And then it's also post funnel. And a really interesting way to know more about your customers. And if you have, platforms that make it easy to serve that up, it just becomes part of people's daily review of what's going on in my accounts.
That's a great point. That's a great point. Just looking at time here, I think we're at the tail end and wrapping up, but any final or closing thoughts about account-based Fridays or anything else that's on your mind? We got a minute or two left.
Yeah, well, I hope if folks found value, give us your feedback on what you'd love to hear about, if you thought this was helpful. Also would love suggestions for guests who'd like to come on. I think between John and me, we've got some ideas for people that we'd like to invite. Maybe we could even consider extending the session a little bit if we've got a great guest coming in. And then the other thing is we'll be sharing, suggestions of cool reading. I'm going to point people just quickly, and I'll put this into my LinkedIn feed. But I saw a great blog this week from Jesse Johnson at Forrester on decoding, kind of proactively decoding B2B buying signals, very much related to what we've been talking about and really breaking it down nicely. So I'll send a link to that one. Bruce Bryan of Hive9 put an amazing post out there on attribution models with incredible detail on models. Honestly, I've been looking at this a long time. There were some he thought of that I've never even thought of that, it really, really good. And I know, he's from a vendor, but hear him out because it's super useful. And I think it gives companies a starting point to talk about different kinds of models. And then I'll point to a neat article on why 2021 is the year of the account from John Miller, who's been doing some really cool things with demand base. And then last but not least, I really liked the piece from the analyst at Gartner talking about change communications, because all of the work that we're talking about requires change. And how do you communicate and ease people into it and not make them utterly miserable? So yeah, those were some cool things. But if other people see cool things too, send them our way. If you wrote it, send it our way. Like, always happy to see the best of the content that's out there. There's so much good stuff. So how about you, John?
Yeah. No, I echo everything you say there. And on the change management piece in particular, I'm going to actually go back and take a deeper look at that, because quite frankly, we see a number of companies right now that I call it the gym membership syndrome. Everybody wants to be in shape, right? Including myself. Like I was a few pounds lighter back in the day. Actually, you and I share a common undergrad. Like back in the undergrad days, I was I was a different person back then, but it's a gym membership syndrome where people buy the gym membership. They want to be in revenue shape. And lo and behold, buying that gym membership, buying the technology is just not going to get you in shape. There is some change management to get you to that revenue shape. We all want to be, 10 pounds lighter, especially now in the COVID world. And we want to be producing more revenue. So you have to put in the work and you have to put in the change management. So I'm definitely going to reflect on that Gartner article. Anyway, I appreciate you making the time, and everybody that's on the line here bearing with us on our first live. We're going to keep. Yeah, exactly. We're going to keep iterating on this until we perfect it. But for our inaugural one, this to me went really, really well. And yeah, continuous improvement.
Yep. Super excited, John. Thanks for the great idea to set this up. I'm very excited to keep it going. And thanks everybody for joining us, and happy Account Based Friday.
Absolutely.
All right.